The key felt heavy in my palm. A cold, jagged piece of victory. It was gold-plated, much like the life I had meticulously rebuilt from the ashes my sister and her husband had left me in 5 years ago. I stood at the threshold of the $1.2 million estate, a sprawling minimalist masterpiece of glass and cedar tucked into the hills, and took a breath of air that didn't taste like debt or desperation. The sky was clear, the wind was sharp, and for once my chest felt light instead of tight. This was my secret, my sanctuary, and today was moving day. I had planned every detail down to the timing, the deliveries, and the security systems that quietly guarded what was mine. I had rehearsed the moment in my head, expecting stillness, expecting peace, expecting the sound of my own footsteps and nothing else. But as I pulled my SUV into the winding cobblestone driveway, the silence I expected was replaced by the rhythmic thud-clack of a ramp hitting pavement and the obnoxious shouting of men in high-visibility vests. Two massive moving trucks were already parked in front of my grand entrance. Boxes were being hauled out. Furniture, hideous floral-patterned sofas I recognized with a sickening jolt, was being carried toward my mahogany front doors. The scene looked like an invasion disguised as a moving day. And there, standing on the porch like a conquering hero, was Marcus, my sister's husband. Beside him, my sister Elena was directing the movers with the same shrill, entitled tone she had used to ruin my life half a decade ago. They didn't see me yet. They were too busy colonizing my dream. They acted like the driveway, the porch, the entryway, and the view belonged to them, as if claiming it out loud would make it true. I sat in my car, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, and I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, a slow, predatory smile spread across my face. The game hadn't just begun. It was already over. They just didn't know it yet. My heartbeat stayed steady because the plan had been built for this exact moment. To understand why I didn't shift into reverse and call the police, you have to understand the background. 5 years ago, I wasn't the woman in the luxury SUV. I was the reliable sister. When our parents died, they left us the family home and a modest life insurance policy. Elena, always the sensitive one, the one who couldn't handle real-world stress, leaned on me. Then she met Marcus. Marcus was a man of expensive tastes and zero equity. He wore confidence like a suit, and he used charm like a tool. Within a year, they had convinced me to co-sign a massive business loan for a surefire tech startup. They used our family home as collateral. When the startup failed, or rather, when Marcus funneled the money into offshore accounts and luxury vacations, the bank came for the house. I'll never forget the rainy Tuesday they moved out. They had already secured a rental across town, using the last of the cash. I found out when the sheriff arrived to serve the eviction notice. Elena wouldn't look me in the eye. Marcus just smirked and said, "It's just business, Maya. You were always too emotional about a pile of bricks." I spent 3 months sleeping in my car. I worked 3 jobs, clawing my way through the tech industry, fueled by a singular, cold, burning fire. I didn't just want my money back. I wanted the truth to land where it belonged, on their doorstep, in a way they could not ignore. I knew Marcus was drowning in new debt, trying to maintain the facade of a high roller. I knew they were looking for a statement home to impress a group of investors for Marcus's latest scam. So, I created one. I bought this house through a blind shell company. Then I leaked the opportunity through a crooked real estate agent I knew Marcus was using. I made sure the lease-to-own agreement looked like a steal, a desperate seller needing a quick exit. I made the paperwork dense, convoluted, and riddled with default clauses that would make a shark flinch. Every page was a trap dressed up as a bargain. Marcus, in his infinite greed and arrogance, didn't hire a lawyer. He saw a $1.2 million house for a fraction of the cost and thought he was the smartest man in the room. He thought speed was intelligence and shortcuts were skill. I stepped out of the car. The sun caught the chrome of my wheels, and finally Elena noticed me. Her face went through a fascinating transformation. Shock, then guilt, then a mask of smug superiority. "Maya," she called out, smoothing her designer dress. "What on earth are you doing here? How did you even find this address?" Marcus stepped forward, puffing out his chest. If you're here for a handout, Maya, the timing is poor. We're right in the middle of a big move. As you can see, things have changed for us. His voice tried to sound generous, but it was really territorial. I didn't argue. I didn't mention that I owned the gravel they were standing on. I just smiled, a warm, wide, effortless smile. Oh, I'm not here for a handout, Marcus. I saw the moving trucks from the main road and thought I recognized that hideous arm wire of yours. I couldn't believe it. Are you moving in here? Elena smirked, crossing her arms. It's a lease to own, a private deal. It's a bit out of your league, honey. But I suppose we can let you see the foyer before we get settled. That is incredible, I said, my voice dripping with fake sincerity. It's a beautiful home, truly. Here, let me help you with those smaller boxes. It's the least I can do for family. I watched their eyes light up, not with kindness, but with the satisfaction of believing they were above me again. Marcus looked suspicious for a second, but his ego won out. Well, at least you know your place now. Grabbed the kitchen crates. For the next 3 hours, I helped them. I carried boxes into my own house. I listened to them brag about the marble countertops I had personally selected. I listened to Marcus talk about the investor gala he was going to host in my backyard to launch his new firm. I even suggested where they should put their dusty, cheap bookshelves. I was the perfect sister. I was the reliable one again. I even brought them lemonade. I played the part flawlessly, because a trap works best when the prey believes it is safe. By 400 p.m., the movers were gone. Their junk was scattered across my pristine hardwood floors. Elena was sitting on a crate, fanning herself. Finally, she sighed. A home that reflects our status. It really does. I agreed, leaning against the kitchen island. It reflects exactly who you are. Marcus frowned. Something in my tone had shifted. The air in the room suddenly felt heavy. The light from the windows looked the same, but the mood changed like a door quietly closing. All right, Maya. You've had your tour. We have a lot of unpacking to do. You can go now. Go. I tilted my head. But I just got here, and there's one thing we haven't done yet. What's that? Elena asked, her voice laced with irritation. The final inspection, I said. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. I laid it on the marble island. The envelope looked ordinary, but it carried the weight of the last 5 years. Wait a minute, Marcus shouted, his eyes darting from the envelope to my face. What the hell is that? That looks like the lease agreement. It is, I said softly. But you should check the signature on the blesser of line. You see, Marcus, you didn't lease this house from Up the Global Properties Holdings. You leased it from me. I am the sole owner of that shell company. And per section 8.2 of the contract you signed, the one you didn't have, a lawyer, read, the lease is only valid if the security deposit is cleared in full by 400 p.m. today. Marcus paulded. I sent the wire this morning. Oh, I know, I said, my smile growing cold. But that wire didn't go to an escrow account. It went toward the $400,000 you owed in back taxes and the outstanding debt from our parents' house. I bought that debt, Marcus. I own your ears. The deposit you paid today was actually just a legal repayment of the money you stole from me 5 years ago. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the sound of Elena's Sharpie rolling off a box and hitting the floor. You can't do that, Elena stammered, her voice trembling. We moved everything. Our whole life is in these boxes. Wait a minute, Marcus roared again, his face turning a deep, bruised purple. He lunged for the papers on the counter, his hands shaking as he flipped through them. This says the lease is terminated immediately upon default of the deposit. It says we have to vacate within 1 hour. Actually, I corrected him gently, it says you must vacate immediately upon discovery of breach. And since I am the landlord and I am standing right here, I've officially discovered the breach. I walked over to the front door and swung it wide open. The evening chill began to creep into the house. The cold air felt clean, like reality. Maya, please, Elena cried, the sensitive act returning in full force. We have nowhere to go. We gave up our rental. We spent all our liquid cash on the movers and that deposit. You're our sister. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the woman who watched me cry as the bank changed the locks on our childhood home. I saw the woman who had spent the last 5 years living high on the hog while I worked myself to the bone to survive. I remembered every cramped night, every humiliating meal, every silent morning where hope felt like a bill I could not pay. Family, I whispered. That's a funny word, Elena. You used it like a weapon. I'm using it like a mirror. I'm just showing you the world you created for me. You're a monster, Marcus hissed, stepping toward me. I didn't flinch. I pointed to the driveway where 2 black SUVs had just pulled up. Out stepped 4 uniformed security guards I had hired for the occasion. The monsters are the ones who take a person's home and leave them in a car, I said, my voice steady and hard as granite. I'm just a homeowner protecting her property. You have 15 minutes to get your essential items. The rest of this junk will be moved to the curb by morning. If you're still on the premises in 16 minutes, you'll be trespassing. Every number I said was intentional because boundaries are real when you finally own them. The next hour was a chaotic, tragic blur. I watched from the balcony as Marcus and Elena scrambled, screaming at each other, throwing clothes into suitcases, their status crumbling with every frantic movement. Elena was sobbing. That ugly, guttural sound of someone who has finally realized they aren't the protagonist of the story anymore. Marcus was trying to call lawyers only to be told the same thing over and over. The contract was ironclad, and he was broke. The panic on their faces was loud, even when they stopped speaking. They dragged their suitcases down the driveway. They didn't have a truck. They didn't have a plan. They stood at the edge of the property, surrounded by a few bags of clothes, looking back at the glowing windows of the million-dollar house they thought they had stolen. I walked to the front door and looked out at them one last time. Maya! Elena screamed, her makeup streaked with tears. Where are we supposed to go? I thought back to that rainy Tuesday 5 years ago. I thought about the cold nights and the taste of cheap ramen. I heard the back of a 2018 sedan is surprisingly spacious this time of year, I said. I closed the door. The click of the lock was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I walked through the house, turning on every single light. I stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by their boxes, the physical remnants of their greed. Tomorrow, a crew would come to haul it all to the landfill. Tomorrow, I would have the floors deep cleaned. But tonight, I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of the vintage wine Marcus had brought to celebrate his new home, and sat on the floor in the middle of the empty, echoing space. The house felt quiet, in the way a healed wound feels quiet, tender but no longer bleeding. The tragic part wasn't that I had lost my family. I had lost them a long time ago. The tragic part was that it took $1 million house for them to finally see me. I took a sip of the wine. It was expensive, complex, and slightly bitter. It tasted like justice. I am Maya. I am no longer the reliable sister. I am the woman who owns her life, her future, and every single square inch of this beautiful, silent, empty home. The end.